Konbanwa. My name is Adam Wanlin, and I am going to be talking about classic food storage methods and its effect on Japanese cuisine today. Meaning classic food storage that relates to salting, drying, pickling, and fermenting. Throughout history, the act of preserving food allows access to necessary dietary elements, even in times where food is not readily available, and was essential for survival before refrigeration. Um, Japan has some very interesting approaches to preservation. One which is very entirely unique, which I'll be talking about later, which actually led to the creation of sushi. Um, and yeah, what really separates Japan, I think, is just more or less the choices and the preparation for these foods, and how commonly they're eaten today, still compared to other countries and their consumption of these classically stored foods. Um, yeah, let's get it going. So fermentation works by converting sugars into lactic acid or alcohol, and that lowers the pH of the liquid to be more acidic. And this acidity prevents growth of bacteria, oh, yeast, um, and other microorganisms that are likely to spoil food. Um, One fun fact is that fermenting foods actually can add some micronutrients to vegetables, and it mostly maintains the macronutrients previously held in whatever food is being fermented. Um, and fermented foods can last over a year without refrigeration. So there is a lot of taste alteration to when it comes to fermented foods as well. In Japan, many foods have been traditionally fermented by adding koji or rice mold to rice, wheat, or soybeans. Koji mold produces a large number of enzymes with the power to break down proteins into amino acids and starches into sugars. It adds a salty, sour, and especially for Japanese cuisine, they aim for an umami flavor that is deeply appreciated in Japanese culture. Uh, One fun fact about fermented foods in Japan is that they've been around for almost 16,000 years, estimated at least. Um, but yeah, all the way back to the Jomon period. So that's pretty cool. Fermented foods, some popular ones is umeboshi, which is it's rice or it's a pickled plum, which is often used in onigiri, which is like a little rice ball where they put like different meats or umeboshi inside and they eat it with like a little bit of nori, which is seaweed. Nattos, which I do not like, which are these fermented soybeans. Um, I don't know, not my thing. Tsukemono and even sake, the alcoholic drink. Miso, shoyu mirin, and even rice vinegar are popular condiments too, uh, that are created through fermentation. And this pungent and complex flavor that fermented food presents is really appreciated in Japan. Pickling is next. Pickling, I mean, if you know what a pickle is, it's pretty much where you put whatever food or vegetable into a liquid that is harmful to bacteria. So in Japan, rice vinegar is most commonly used. This prevents any degradation or growth of bacteria, yeast, or mold, while also limiting oxygenation and oftentimes salting the food a little bit too. So sometimes foods will shrink while they are being pickled. Adds a salty and sour flavor and can even add a crunchy texture. And this maintains most macronutrients and micronutrients as well. And it lasts up to 2 years. And I've heard up to 8 years depending on the food. Pickling practices have been around in Japan just as long as fermentation, back to the Jomon period. Foods include that umeboshi again, which is sometimes fermented, sometimes pickled. Yellowed pickled daikon radish, fuku jinzuke, gari, which is white ginger, and then beni soga, which is red ginger. Both of those are often eaten with sushi, and shibazuke, which is just a common side dish of eggplant. I think it's over that. But yeah, all these are really good, and they're very. It's not completely unique to Japan, but the consumption, how often they're eaten in Japan and Korea, both almost every day in their diets, consume these fermented or pickled foods. This one's my favorite. It's salt and rice fermentation. And this is what actually led to the creation of modern day sushi. It went from nare sushi to fuya sushi. Some regions experience heavy monsoons and intense heat, and the people of these regions devised a way to ferment and preserve local fish, supplying necessary food to nutrients and nutrients during harsh seasons. Yet again, this traces back to ancient China. It's a mix of that fermentation and salting. Um, It actually transitions in the creation of it, which I'll talk about later. Preserve nutrients, but does not at all. You'll see why. Preserve the original flavor. Here, let me pull this up. The gill cavity is stuffed with large amounts of high quality salt, and the salted fish are placed into containers weighted down by tsukemoni oishi, or pickling stones. These salted fish are left for about 6 months, during which time the salt destroys harmful bacteria, softens the fish bones, and pulls out excess water. It is rigorously rinsed, dried, and then put back into the container along with cooked rice for about a year to ferment. And sometimes they'll do a double fermentation because I think it removes some of the pickled flavor. But funazushi is it's right here. It's very strong. It has a very strong cheese flavor. As I've been told, very fermented, raw fish flavor. It's very intense. Actually, so intense that there have been jokes written back to the Nara period, I think, talking about how it tastes like barf because it's a lot. In the Edo period, though, it really lost popularity. But another version of it called Hayazushi, which is a fastened Haya, meaning fast in Japanese, by the way. Um, a hastened version of this sushi where it was just shortly fermented from directly from raw fish and then eaten with rice and rolled. That became a hand roll, and that consequently ended up becoming modern day sushi. That fermentation, that fermented flavor, is attempted to be replicated through rice vinegar that is added to rice. So that's kind of where you get that unique flavor when you eat sushi. Um, the addition of vegetables and nori and people put like cream cheese in it now. That's all modern day. That's not classically in Japan, but now modern day Japan it is. Um, yeah, this fermented raw flavor is still loved in Japan, and but now just a more mild and calm version of that is eaten every day with sushi all across the world. Um, Salting and drying, just similar to that, commonly used throughout all cultures and Japanese culture. There's not as many popular foods, but one thing about this is that there's two different methods that they use, which is furishozuke, the salt sprinkling, and tatejiro suke, which is immersed in the brine. And these are mostly just used for fish. They don't salt vegetables very often. All right. And just to conclude all this, Japan is not the only country to feature these traditional methods of food storage into modern day cuisine, but the frequency and popularity of food still prepared in a traditional manner cannot be overlooked. From sushi to sake, umeboshi, and even soy sauce and ginger, the frequency of fermented, salted, and pickled foods still being consumed today really just contribute to what makes Japanese cuisine so unique and so loved by people all over the world. These flavors persist and really still fit into the classic Japanese diet of, you know, relatively like high fat, low sugar, a lot of fish. It's a very well-rounded and healthy diet. And not only just contributing to the nutrient and the health of the Japanese culture, but just to the flavor. These classic storage methods that aren't really necessary today, but are still very commonly used to preserve that flavor, which is just so loved in Japan. So thank you all for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this and have a good day.